There we go, guys. Come on. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the first Flat Earth meeting such in New Zealand. It's a great pleasure to have you all here. Thank you for coming from near and far. Firstly, I'd like to thank Matthew, who has backed me all the way in helping to set things up, and also Chad, who's managed to get a hold of Mark Sargent and do things in the background which gets us all here today. So a big round of applause for those two people. Thank you very much. We're underway. I think if Chad would like to have a karakia, we can get underway and get going. And Dave Murphy's our first guest speaker up, so if you like to ask him anything, please feel free. So let's go from there, shall we? Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich. All right, so yeah, grab a seat anywhere you like, guys.
Kia ora tātou. So to say straight out, I'm not very religious. I was religious once, but Flat Earth is slowly bringing me back because I know there's a creator now.
Amen.
I believed in science for so long, thinking that there's no way there could be this invisible person that put us here. As I got into the Flat Earth, it slowly bringing me back, hey, maybe there is a creator, rather than believing in the 92 million miles away sun and all this kind of crap. So in light of that, I can tell I'll open up the Coke here. No, me being the slow person I am, I didn't learn one before I came up, so on the way on the bus, never else, trying to learn my karakia on the way up here, eh? Cool. So if I do F up a bit, anyone that knows the karakia, please join me. So what I'll do is I'll do it in Te Reo first, and then English. Ki te ingoa, te mātua, ka mai te wana tapona ne, amene. E tō mātua e te rangi, kia taka tō ingoa, kia tā mai tō te rangatitanga, ki metia tau e pā ai, ki runga ki te whenua, ki reta anō ki tō te rangi, ko mai kia mātua ai nei, te tarango mātua mō tēnei rā, murua mātua hara, me mātua kia mū nei, e o te hunga e harana kia mātua, aua hoki mātua e hawea kia whakawaia, engari, whakaorangia mātua i te kilo, no hoki te rangatitanga, te kaha me te kōreria, ake, Amen. Amen. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses, and we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, deliver us from evil, power and glory, ours now and forever. Amen. Amen. Thank you, Rob.
As I say, our first guest speaker is Dave Murphy, who's kindly given up his time. It's like about 12:30 over there on the hill.
Hey, can I take this opportunity to introduce myself?
Yes, please.
Hey, my name's Mike Peters. I'm on line as Free Mankind. I talk a lot about the calendar as well as the Flat Earth. I follow the calendar, the 28, 29, 30, 31, 4-year leap year is lunatic. Yeah. When they talk about the mark of the beast, when you're planning your life and reflecting your life and using these labels, Monday, Tuesday, Christmas, Easter, they're heart disconnecting us. This is a heart awareness, a heart brain that sends signals to and when we're in sync with synchronicity, which is following the stages of the moon. Now I followed this thinking we're on a ball for 7 years, 7 months, and on the 7th day of the 7th year, 7 months, I realised we're flat and stationary. I'm on the 10th year of fight, but I still know the calendar is counted on the 2 ankles, 2 knees, 2 hips, 2 wrists, 2 elbows, 2 shoulders, and the sacred 7, the 13 in the middle. And it's also the 20 fingers and toes which tell a story. So you've got the 13 tones of creation and the 20 truths that tell a story. Red dragon, white one, blue night, yellow sea, red sun, white wolf, blue hand, yellow star, red moon, white dog, blue monkey, yellow human, red skywalker, white wizard, blue eagle, yellow warrior, red earth, white mirror, 19, blue storm to the alpha 020 of the sun. And starts again, red, white, blue, yellow, red, white, blue, yellow, red, white, blue, yellow, and follow the 20. Now this 260-day combination count also has the 364, the 28 days, which is 14 and 14 on us, 13 times. With 1 day that takes into the account the analema, where the sun is going from our solstice out here in the outer ring, takes 13 weeks, 91 and a quarter days, making its way uphill to the equinox, and 91 and a quarter to the top. That's why it's low in our sky now, and we're in the outer ring, and it's at the top, and working its way to the top of the dome. And then it comes back down to us, IOTLO, Alpha, Omega, leaders of love, peace, and harmony. You know, my grandfather was a Rhino minister, and he said to me, God came over the cloud and took the clouds of ball of fire, spoke to T.W. Rhino, the mighty prophet, the same one he spoke to know. He said, in the four corners of the earth, and ANZ New Zealand's out from here up to the people of this land to show the rest of the world how to live in love, peace and harmony. We, the people of this land, you didn't have to be born here, the measure of Arowanto, the people of this land invented trench warfare. We were not conquered, we were corrupted. We sold our tongue, our treasures, our wine, our tongue for the beads and the alcohol and the tobacco. But they knew just how much alcohol and tobacco to give first contact to the people of this land. But we invented trench warfare. And it was through the women and the children moving on that dirt that those people that made fear weren't conquered. Now we made a treaty. Now the parent has come. The Māori adopted the parent, the Pākehā as a parent. The parent has been caught red-handed, lying about 12 months calendar designed, the heart disconnected so we can't hear our hearts. We're too busy worried about power bill, shooting for the kids, phone bill, you know, jamming up the works of our women and our love, our time, our treasures that we've committed our father's sins, you know. We treated where's the fathers of our daughters? So I said, where's the fathers of, I'm honoured to have a daughter-in-law, you know, I've got 2 sons, you know, but the fathers of our daughter, if I have my daughter, you know, she'd know, you know, the measure of a man is not money and stuff, you know.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark.
Are you on with us, Dave?
Oh.
There he is. There he is.
Big round of applause for those two, please.
Everyone.
Hello, David. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Awesome.
We're
sorry to keep you up so late.
Would you like to tell us just quickly how you became a Flat Earth member?
All right, okay. Well, I was just an ordinary bloke. I've been doing research now for about 15 years on various different topics. And I was researching something completely, you know, unrelated. And I came across a video. It was very sciencey, and I used to love science, yeah. I don't anymore. But I started watching this sciencey video talking about experiments, and it kind of dawned on me. It was talking about kind of like flat Earth, and I thought, you know, I was just about to turn it off. When it started talking about the Bedford Levels experiment, which kind of caught my attention, and then it introduced this idea that the curvature was, 8 inches per mile squared. I thought, hang on a second, that's that makes the Earth pretty small, doesn't it? I'm sure I've seen things that are way further than the experiment was over 6 miles. I thought way further than 6 miles, and I could see the bottom of it. So I went out and I started, experimenting, looking at things. I think the first thing I went out to see was in Plymouth over here. There's a lighthouse that's 8 miles out from Plymouth home. So I was standing on the beach, head down by the water, and literally I could see the bottom of the lighthouse 8 miles away. Where the water touched the rocks. So that's what started me in on it, and I haven't looked back since.
Good man. Great, Dave. We can put this to the floor if you like, and if anybody has anything that they'd like to ask Dave, feel free to have a say.
How do you get day and nights?
How do you get day and nights, Dave?
Day and night.
Some part of the country is in daytime and some part is in nighttime at the same time.
All right, well, that's pretty straightforward, really. I mean, we have a sun that's you know, small and close, and you know, it throws out light only a certain distance, kind of like got a piece of card here. Well, you can't see because it's, and I've got a torch. So you know, it's kind of obvious, really. If it's, you know, the sun's not 93 million miles away, which we know it's not. You know, we can go out and on a day with, you know, broken cloud, and we can see the light coming down at angles. And what's really interesting is that the scientific community will go to great lengths to tell us that it's actually coming down, you know, parallel. And you know, they'll keep going, banging on. It's coming down parallel. It's coming down parallel, and it's just perspective that we're seeing. Right. So, if light is coming down parallel, you know, every other day of the year, how come it comes down at angles during an eclipse? Because that's the only way that you're going to get this idea of an umbra and penumbra. When, you know, if light has to be coming down at angles. Yeah, to form those angles to make a shadow that's smaller than the thing that's casting it. So that's why you get a 70-mile wide shadow of a moon that's a couple of thousand miles wide. Yeah, if light was coming down parallel, you get a shadow of the moon the same size as the moon. You know, so and also they say that the sun is, you know, exactly the right distance away. And the moon is exactly the right size difference from the sun, so that they actually cover each other. So that tells you that there's no way that light can be seeping either end of, you know, around the moon to make this umbra penumbra thing. Yeah, it's a lie, it's a contradiction. Yeah, it works one way when it suits them and another way when it suits them, you know, too. So
Like gravity.
I hope I didn't go on too much.
No, not enough. Next.
What causes the phases of the moon?
Sorry, say again?
What causes the phases of the moon?
Well, this is one that, you know, I'm not quite sure about, because, you know, it would seem very obvious that, you know, it's the interaction between the light coming from the sun and our position. But now that we realise that the moon is actually throwing out its own light, it's not reflecting the light from the sun, because if you've got one of those fancy laser thermometers, you can go out on a full moon and, you know, set up an experiment where you've got moonlight, maybe a piece of card on the floor, moonlight, you know, touching this piece of card, and the shade of the moonlight, and you can find the temperature difference between the moonlight and the shade of the moonlight. And you'll find that the moonlight is colder than the shade, which is the opposite to the way the sun works. So it's not reflecting the sun's light, it's throwing its own light out, which is a very different quality to the moon, the sunlight. So it's not, you know, it's not automatically reflecting sunlight. So I don't know what causes the moon phases. You know, it would, you know, it would seem that the model we've been told isn't true.
Would be on UAP channel. Sorry, Praveen. UAP channel on YouTube does a good one about the moon phases.
Do you think possibly that the moon is not so much reflecting but filtering the sunlight, giving off its own spectrum?
No.
So if the sun's above the moon and the moon's, say, on another shell, so to speak, of the different layers of firmament or different layers of atmosphere or wherever it is, that the light shining above is being filtered through the moon.
I do have to say I can't really hear from out there.
Come closer.
Sorry, Dave. Yeah, what I'm asking is, do you think that the sun could be getting filtered through the moon, not so much reflecting through, but the sunlight that's behind, say, the moon as a filter could be changing the light spectrum, so the moon will appear it's giving off a different type of light, a cooling light, but it's still all from the same light source?
Well, there's no model in the scientific community that will explain how the light from the sun, which is the heat from the sun, which is infrared light, can be reflected and be cool.
Yeah.
There's no model for that. Yeah, the only way it could happen, which is still wouldn't happen, is if the moon was a deep green colour that would absorb all the infrared light, but then it wouldn't reflect kind of cold light. It wouldn't, give you a cold light. It would just be an absence of heat. So no, there is no model that explains why, how reflected light could actually be colder than the source it's being reflected from. If that makes any sense.
I think it's TLP's, transient lunar phenomenon.
Right.
It releases its own light, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you hear that, Dave?
Not quite.
TLP's,
TLP, translucent.
transient lunar phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's releasing its own light.
What?
Yeah.
From that.
I'm not familiar with that term.
No.
All right. Okay.
Oh,
Google that.
Well,
I agree.
if we go back to the creation
I
model in the
agree.
Bible, sorry, if we go back to the creation model in the Bible, God created the firmament and he says in there 2 lights. One for ruling of the day and one for ruling of the night. 2 separate lights. Not one filtered through the other,
That's right.
not one
That's right.
reflecting off the other. 2 separate lights.
Yep.
I got that. That's simple.
I would agree with that. I'm all for what the Old Testament says. The interesting thing that I've come across lately is this idea that the light is coming from outside of the firmament and actually being focused at a certain point in the sky.
Yeah.
And that would actually kind of explain the angles of light coming down because it's crossing a focal point. And but it's all speculation at this point. Another idea that was very interesting is that the sun is an electrical source, and we have in our atmosphere these noble gases, neon, argon, xenon, and all that. And it's very interesting when you put an electrical source near argon or neon or whatever, it lights up. So it's interesting that we have in our atmosphere, this precise mix of these noble gases, and if there was a strong electrical source, it would actually cause the air itself to light up. So yeah, that's very interesting, but I don't tend to stick behind things like that because I can't prove it. I can't. There's no way for me to prove any of it. So it's all speculation.
Definitely food for thought.
Can I just ask something?
Yes.
Dave, in the Torah with the creation, it says that on day 1 God created, he said let there be day and let there be night, and he separated the 2. Okay, so on day 1 we had day and night, alright? Only on day 4 that he created the sun and the moon.
Right.
Okay,
Mhm.
so my question was not so much a question, is just wanting to hear your thoughts on, is there a difference between daylight and that which the sun gives off? Because a lot of people are, I think, are under the misconception that it's the sun that creates the daylight, the day. But the day and night was created on day 1. The sun and moon only came in on day 4.
The light of the soul.
Right.
So your thoughts on that, please.
Well, this is why I thought that last theory that I just mentioned was very interesting because it gives you a distinction between sunlight and daylight. Yeah, this electrical source itself could be providing light, but it could be the air itself. As in the case of this mix of noble gases, that actually creates a daylight effect around it. So yes, it's quite possible that just with the interaction between the electrical interaction between the ground and the firmament to cause daylight, to cause the whole sky to light up. Yeah. So it didn't say. That's what I'm saying. It creates that is a mechanism to create light without the sun, just an electrical interaction between the air and the firmament and the ground and the noble gases in the air.
Because you do actually get, with neon and argon, they've experimented and they put electric charges to it, and you get every colour you get in the sky with sunsets and sunrises and that. You can get exactly the same colours with neon with an electrical charge. So I totally get where Dave's coming from with that.
Because on day 4 it was the sun, moon and the stars. So my understanding and on looking at it was that it's there for us to keep time, if I can use the word time, where the sun is for the hours of the day, the moon is for the days of the month, and the stars are for the months of the year. That's why they travelled by the stars, because they could figure it all out.
3 separate
So
versions.
it's quite an interesting concept that the sun, moon, and stars, hours, months, and
Years.
stars for the year.
Yeah. It doesn't say, you know, the sun, moon, and stars were created for signs and seasons, weeks and years. So what's interesting is that you know, the signs are now being turned into entertainment. Yeah, we had the Great American Eclipse last year. That was a big sign in the sky, and you know, it goes into my research these days about human history. But these signs in the sky are significant. Yeah, the eclipse only affected America, and it affected it in such a way that if it wasn't for the chemtrails, every man, woman, and child would have seen that event or partially in the sky. So it was a sign for everybody who lives in America. And strangely enough, doing a bit of research, I found that in 1619 there was another eclipse that just went over West Africa, and a very specific part of West Africa, where the Negroes lived who were taken as slaves. And it happened just before you know, the first Europeans came over and took them as slaves. So yes, these are signs in the sky. When they show you blood moons and things, and they give you explanations about umbras and penumbras and stuff, yeah, that's rubbish. Yeah, there's no umbras and penumbras, there's just shadows. So if you know, you cannot get a red moon from the moon in shadow. You know, that's all.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Dave, I've got another question I've been trying to figure out, because I'm an avid diver, and I always have to rely on tides to get my best kayak food. So I always get asked the question, being a diver, so how do the tides work? And I came up with a theory because I saw a video online of a magnet pushing water away. I was thinking maybe there's the magnetism in the North Pole that comes down and rises every 6 hours. It pushes the water out and then brings the water back in. I thought that might be something you might have thought of, or do you have your idea about how tides work every 6 hours?
Well, I would say that there was a huge magnetic source, electromagnetic source. You know, with the sun. I think the sun is what actually affects the water. We know that you know, large bodies of water that aren't connected to the seas aren't affected by the moon, or they don't get tides in the same way. So I personally think it's the actual movement of the sun that's causing the tides. I don't have a model to explain it, but that's just my belief at this point. The trouble with this, you know, this whole flat Earth movement, if we want for want of a better word, is that we are going along on the little information that we've been given, or we can go out and look for ourselves. So there's a lot of speculation in this, and until we get more information, we can't really move very much further forward. We can only just be putting out you know, ideas and theories and speculations. But yeah, that's the thing. It's the only thing we can do at this point is speculate. And I tend not to speculate on these things because, you know, I only like to talk about things I know.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think also it's one needs to use your kind of common sense, like in terms of the tides. I agree with you that why do lakes, why are they not tidal yet the oceans are? And for me, the big one is that it's not the moon that creates a tide, because you get one moon passing every 24 hours, but you get 2 high tides and 2 low tides. So if the moon creates the first one and it's gone, what creates the second one?
Could be the electromagnetic push-pull of the sun and the moon as it's going across. It'll push, and then as it's going past, it'll push away.
I also think the hot and cold
And the salt water as well. If you have flowing water and put a magnet to it, it will push it away. If you run water out of your tap.
Salt conducts electricity.
Exactly. Whereas most lakes are fresh water, so they won't react in the same fashion.
Plus we have the hot and cold currents that will, you know, push each other and pull each
Exactly.
other.
Yeah, it's like a convection oven as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
I guess a more interesting question to ask is if the moon's weak gravity is enough to affect the water on Earth,
You say
how
the
come,
G word.
you know, in the all-Earth model, how come, you know, when the sun, on a new moon, when the moon and the sun are exerting, you know, gravitational pull on one side of the Earth, how come you suddenly don't get a super tide every time there's a new moon?
Yeah. And if we're 70% water,
Oh no,
But we've lost them.
there goes the power.
okay, Chad's getting onto that.
Who
Yeah,
kicked the
it's
switch?
getting another charger. Batteries run low.
Yeah. Damn, we'll have to get Chad to pull us back on.
You got a charger?
Yes, he has. He's just
Yeah.
gone to get
Chad.
it. That went quick.
But it said 10% was left, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, be using the Wi-Fi and everything else.
Yeah, no, Wi-Fi videos. It's
Like
So
special
close.
space.
I've got a question, maybe one of you guys can answer. What is the reason for tides? Why do we have tides? Why did God put them in place, basically? Why do we have tides?
Perhaps it is to do with, well, perhaps it's to do with the quality of life. They need, you know, like there's certain shellfish that need that time water and time out of water. And yeah, it could be well.
If water's there still, it goes stagnant.
Exactly.
Anything that stays still goes stagnant. Your muscles, anything.
Yeah.
You've got to have motion. Motion creates the field, the force.
Yeah. Hey, you want to ask Dave about the planes, about the airplanes and the tracking and that? I'll ask him. Okay.
Yeah, there he is.
That's all right.
Yeah, up in the corner.
Here we go.
My youngest. Better third.
Yeah.
He's nearly 30. He's kind of.
Yeah, there we are.
Don't worry, Dave, we're not letting you go early.
Oh, they're back.
Like, he'll just ask me, like,
We're not the flightless boo for nothing.
hey,
Trials.
hey.
All right. Okay.
I've got one more question for Dave.
Yeah.
Yes.
At the North Pole, you have the Bulmundala Loka coming from Mount Meru, which connects to the pole star, 50 light years from Earth.
Supposedly.
All the stars tend to chandelier around that pole star on the outside or the inside of the dome. I'm not sure. What do you think?
Right, well, again, I'm not one of those people who, you know, talked about Mount Meru because, you know, I don't know if that exists. I've not been there, so, you know, I'm probably the wrong person to be asking about such things because I don't get involved in things that I really, you know, can't really talk about.
Yeah, this is Vedic cosmology. Yeah.
Yeah, again, I don't go along with Vedic cosmology and cosmic eggs and, you know, all that stuff because, because I don't.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Do you want to just mention about the plane tracking systems with the difference between the northern and southern hemisphere? If you Good.
Right, yeah. I was actually just on a debate yesterday or last night, and this came up that you know, you can go to any plane tracking software online, and you find that in the southern hemisphere, planes take off, and you'll see them being tracked for the first maybe hour or so, and then they disappear. They disappear off the tracking, and then they reappear an hour before landing. You know, and there's no explanation. You know, they say that you know, you've got a global positioning system, but it doesn't seem to work for the southern hemisphere.
It's more like a
Now,
ground.
one of the arguments that was put forward by this panel of debunkers that I was up against was that it's not really GPS, it's literally radar. They're doing radar tracking, even though all of these sites say they're getting GPS data. So they were trying to say to me, these debunkers were trying to say to me that there's no way you know, the planes are relaying their GPS information, you know, back so that they can be tracked. But I had to remind them that there is a transponder which sends information. Now I don't know, I haven't got any details about the data that was being sent, but that transponder signal could, well, I know it sends the aircraft's identification number. It could well send all sorts of telemetry information, including its GPS location. So yeah, that was one of the questions that came up, and they really didn't have an answer, and they were quite quiet after I said all that.
Global positioning systems, not satellites.
Geo-positioning.
Yeah, ground positioning.
Right. They also, one of the things they don't realise is that during World War II, they had two systems, one called RAN and another one called DECA, and they were literally radio triangulation systems that work exactly the same way as GPS apparently works today. And literally the GPS we're using is just the same radio triangulation system, just with a new fancy computer interface on it. That's it.
And their antenna towers look just like, or very similar to what our cell phone towers look like now, back then.
Say that again?
The LRAN and the radar systems back then, the towers they used look very much like the cell phone towers and TV towers and that sort of thing. They look just the same back in World War II.
Spectrum radio.
Exactly, and while we've got sort of huge coverage, over most of the Earth, there's obviously no coverage, in the southern hemisphere once you get away from any of the.
Yeah, pear-shaped.
In the mid-Atlantic, no GPS coverage. Pilots lose it for hours over the mid-Atlantic. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a question about the Antarctic Circle.
Sure.
That's like I find a big blockage for people when I'm telling them about the flat Earth.
You might need to Adrian.
By the speaker.
Sorry. Sorry.
When I'm preaching about the flat Earth to people, one of the big blockages is this Antarctic Circle. Okay, because I'll fall off the edge. Oh, it's like, you've got to explain to them it's like a lake. But what my question is about this so-called military. Okay, now the Antarctic Circle, according to historical people that have sailed it, is 81,000 k's around, place named and everything. Okay, so we've got to honour those people that put their lives on the line to discover. Now the Antarctic Circle on the globe has only got 15,000 k's of coastline. So that's a big one for me, but how do we say about this? We say there's military out there, and we say there's this, and bases being built from Hitler and all that. We need to find some really solid evidence of that more. And what do you think about this military bit? Well, why don't you fly out to the circle, people say. Why don't you take your ship out there and go, So how do we tackle that one? And really would a plane get shot down if it went out there?
It's,
You know, is this true?
Hell yeah.
it's natural.
It is true. It is true because there was a guy called Jarle Andhoy
Yeah.
who actually tried to go to Antarctica without supervision and without permission, and he was literally picked up and taken back to I think it's South America and fined heavily for it.
Did he advertise he was going out there though, and did they?
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually got permission from his
He
government.
randomly went. He randomly went.
They'll pick you up past the 18th parallel. You can't go.
You can't,
Yeah, like,
yeah,
this is something
can't
I
go
need to
60.
do.
Just asking, did he advertise that he was doing it? That's the reason why he did get picked up, because they knew he was going.
No, he didn't. He didn't advertise what he was doing. He was detected and picked up. I think he tried twice, and twice he got picked up. The thing is, there are only 3 places in the world that you can really, practically get to Antarctica from, and it's like the tip of South America, tip of South Africa, and New Zealand, basically. And so they only have to patrol 3 areas.
Let's fuck her a trip then.
Yeah.
Well, just here, just this week that Matt Powland is trying to get down to Antarctica. He's trying to raise funds to do a trip down there, I heard this week.
You need carbon black, mate, to stop the radar hitting you.
Okay.
Need what?
Yeah.
Carbon black. Anti-radar.
He's trying to do it, I'm not too sure, but you go look at his videos, it's like 40 minutes of racket of trying to play guitar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I'm not a big fan, to be honest. As Matt Powland is one of those who's trying to say that he was the one who sort of restarted this interest in the flat Earth. Having watched what his contributions to the flat Earth, it's kind of solely about this whole idea of photo or painting.
Yeah.
That was interesting for the first 15 minutes, but that was it, I haven't seen any other contribution from him since that, apart from slagging other people off. So no, I'm not really much of a fan. I don't bear the guy in malice, but I have not taken very much information from this guy that's of any practical use.
But he was a NASA graphic artist.
He was a NASA graphic artist. But
Yes, and as I said, that was interesting for about 15 minutes.
So insider. Stick to
He's
that
an
then.
Elon Musk.
Maybe you should stick to that then, his hobby of painting.
Yeah. Exactly. Anyone else got any questions?
How come in New Zealand if you went west or you went east and you turned up, either way you went, you end up in South Africa. To get to, you can go different ways to get there.
What's wrong with South Africa?
Well, we can show you
Well,
on
they
that.
all back to there too.
We might have to sum up a bit.
Is that the thing you should...
Whether you circumnavigate east or west,
Yeah.
you're still going to end up
You're
there.
not going past any other country
Well,
in the north.
have a look
Hemisphere
here.
to do that.
You can have a look here.
No, you could go below Australia and still end up back around there again.
In South America.
Yeah.
From here, if you're here and you stay on that
I've got a question.
45th
I've
parallel,
got a question.
no,
Go.
you
Now
won't
that we know
have
the
to
Earth is flat, okay, we're irrefutable, we know it's flat. What now?
Now we do an exploration.
Now, apart from that, I mean, what's the vision for flat Earth movement? What is the vision? Where are we going?
Who's telling us it's not flat? And why are they lying to us? That's the
Why is NASA calling Antarctica white Mars?
Hold on, let's go.
one at a time, guys, one at a time, please.
Okay, where are we going with flat Earth? Well, now that we know it's flat, where are we going? What are we doing?
Well, from my personal view, it's about actually realizing, once you realize that the Earth is not the way they've shown you, it tells you that we live in a created place. Yeah, there's no one natural explanation for this system. So it tells you there's a creator, and if there's a creator, then we are the chief of its creations. Yeah, and so there's nothing between us and the creator. So this idea that we have bosses, this idea that we have these rulers, these elite above us, somehow between you and the Creator, is ridiculous. It's the only way they've been able to take command of us by making us feel like we're insignificant. There's nothing. We're just a microbe crawling around on a speck of dust in an infinite universe that doesn't care about us, and has no regard for us whatsoever. That's the only way that this elite class has been able to insinuate itself in between us and the Creator. Once you realise that that this is a created system, you realise that you can't be controlled by these people.
That's right.
Self-awareness.
I think that's a huge thing in my mind. From a practical standpoint, they're taking billions and billions of dollars from people, all over the earth, right, for this idea of space. And so somebody has to account for that. Somebody has to say, hang on, if there's no space, where's all this money going?
Underground buckets.
Incidentally, the Hebrew word for NASA is nasha, which means to uplift and deceive.
Going to the etymology of the words.
When George Carlin said he referred to people from NASA as assholes.
Assholes,
They're good at setting stuff up that comes back.
All right. Is there anything you just wanted to talk about yourself? Oh, here we go.
I haven't got a question. I just want to know, have you seen this before? I work night shift, and I'm always observant. Once you know the earth is flat and the sun and all that, you are very observant of the moon and stuff.
Take more notice.
Some nights I've come home and I've seen the moon in the same place. Some nights, and some nights the moon is just not there. Have you seen that before?
No moon.
Yeah, there's like no moon. And also, I've seen the moon. I don't know if anyone saw it recently, but it was perfectly half.
Wow.
It was like
With a
the other
straight
half?
line. With a
Straight line. No curve, was just a perfect half moon. I was like, I'm sure someone else would have seen it. It happened like 3 times.
And I've seen the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time, and
Which
only
you
a whole portion of the moon is lit, whereas it should all be lit.
I think God just put a bit of us to take over half of it.
Have you come across that before, Dave? Anything like that?
I've seen some very strange things relating to the moon. Even way before I was a flat earther, me and my family used to go out walking like at 5 o'clock in the morning. Take the kids out to just take this long walk around town. And I watched, I guess, what would be a lunar eclipse. But the weird thing was the shadow was coming up from the bottom and obscuring the moon sort of from the bottom up, which I can't explain. And I went online and sent a question to ask an astronomer and said, I just saw a lunar eclipse, what was happening there, because I haven't seen any mention of it. And they said, no, there was no lunar eclipse, but we saw one. Now, I'm not one that's concentrated on looking at moon phenomena. There's a guy called Dave Marsh who's literally just focused on looking at the moon, and he's done a lot of experiments. So he's the best person to ask on that subject. I've just seen some weird things, like the moon being, one place one night, and then a different place same time the next night, then back to the first place, on the following night. So it's just weird things. And I think I also did a Facebook experiment where I just took a picture of the moon, noted the direction, and asked people, at that moment to tell me where you see the moon. And we got some very odd results. So, but again, I'm not one who focused on the moon. I'm not one who focused on the moon, so I don't really know how to interpret some of the results.
I've got a question. Antarctic, what I think they're protecting is the Anunnaki, right? And they were incarcerated for 70 generations.
The Nephilim?
Not the Nephilim.
Fallen angels, what's your class?
Nephilim are the offspring. But the Anunnaki, the giants, the 200 that landed, they're sitting somewhere in the Antarctic, aren't they?
Yeah. But how can we prove that? That's the thing.
No, we can't.
It's all speculation.
It's out of our reach.
Yeah.
But they're coming back.
Can only really
Right now,
focus on
the 70 generations is interesting because a guy called Rob Skiba basically sat and worked out what would be the 70 generations, and it worked out to be something around 1900, which since we know that the fallen angels gave man technology, including money, that was one of the technologies that the fallen angels gave us. It's interesting that around 1900 we went from horse and carts to space shuttles in less than a generation. So yeah, it would seem that the whole fallen angel thing and the fallen angels being released, has some weight to it. So. I personally do believe that. I'm one of those who's now gone from being an atheist for 40 years to somebody who knows that the Old Testament is a literal book of history, not just past history, but future history too.
David, must have been, it's just a bit of a statement, must have been quite a thing to watch in the days of Joshua when he was battling the Nephilim, and he was running. Apparently, he was running out of daylight hours. He wanted to finish the battle, so he commanded the sun and the moon to stand still. I need more daylight to sort these oaks out. So and just from your own personal perspective. I mean, everybody in terms of the flat Earth, they have their own sort of light bulb moment. So my first part is what was your light bulb moment? And the other question is, like some people focus on the moon and the phases of the moon. What is the one thing about the flat Earth that intrigues you the most?
Well, actually, they both cover the same topic. Actually, the real light bulb moment that said to me, absolutely, no doubt whatsoever, was considering a gyroscope.
Sure.
And realizing that a gyroscope is fixed in space. It's got no reference to the Earth, and no reference to gravity. And in a plane there's a gyroscope, and that was, I was actually in a plane when I thought of that, on my way to the interview with Milenko. I don't know if
Yes.
So on my way to that interview with Milenko, I thought, well, I better write down a few things to say. so I was actually thinking about the moon. That if you see the moon go across the sky over time, you see that the moon kind of rolls, kind of rocks back and forwards as it goes around.
About 90
and
degrees.
since the moon is actually spinning, then it's impossible for it to rock as well because gyroscopic forces.
Yes.
But I thought about that. I thought, well, no, that's not really a convincing.
Why does it show one face? Never
That's
shows
the other thing. But I thought that wasn't really convincing to try and argue. So I realised that the plane has a gyroscope right there too. So that was sort of the light bulb moment for me, and it's also the most convincing argument because every time I get into a debate about this, that's the one question that nobody can answer. How the gyroscope. There's a lot of people trying to debunk it, But in fact, there's a guy on YouTube called Wolfie something, and he shows an artificial horizon, and he sets it so it's off, off the level of the earth and stuff, and then he puts it down, and it seems to right itself. So I don't know what's going on there. Whether he sets it down and switches it off or something, I don't know. But there's another gyroscope that has never righted itself. Yeah, there's a gyroscope that spins in an atmosphere next to a high, a very strong gravitational source, right, which has never ever righted itself. The Earth is a gyroscope. It's fixed at 23.4 degrees, and it's rigid in space next to a very, very powerful gravitational source, the sun, and it's never righted itself. So right there's proof that the gyroscope doesn't right itself, because otherwise we'd our climate would be very much different, wouldn't it?
Still right set up.
So
over
we're
here.
on the flat in the middle of the gyroscope.
Sorry, say again.
We're on the flat bit in the middle of the gyroscope.
No, if the Earth was a globe, it's a gyroscope because it's spinning.
Yeah.
And it's a gyroscope that's spinning and set at an angle of 23.4 degrees.
Very good.
So it has never moved. It's always going around the sun apparently like this. And if gyroscopes righted themselves, over time the Earth should be, the pole should start pointing to the sun. But it doesn't right itself because gyroscopes do not right themselves. And an interesting thing is that way back, maybe 2 years ago, I looked at a Stanford MIT lecture by somebody called Walter Lewin, and he was actually saying that a gyroscope has no reference to gravity or to the Earth. It doesn't regard anything. It's rigid in space. But when I went back to find that video, not only could I not find it, but the actual video portion in one video was actually still there, but they're dubbed over it. So he doesn't say that anymore.
Wow.
So yeah, they're going back and editing so that they're looking at us, they're watching us to see what we find. They're going back and editing it so that nobody else can come along and find it.
Hi Dave, just a quick question, just in regards to the reaction that people have to you generally in your daily life. So obviously you're dealing with professionals and media and other sorts of people, and possibly even people with black suits and black sunglasses. Do you have any stories around that and about how you deal with that?
Well, it's a lot better than it was when I first started talking about it back in 2014. I got the same reaction from everybody. But what was interesting once was I was talking to a group of 3 people, and I got 3 different reactions from them. One person was like, "Wow, that's interesting. I've never thought of it like that." Another person was, "No, I don't want to know," and he walked away. Literally just like, no, gone. And the other person was just like, "What about this? What about that? What about the other?" So it was just odd. There was a whole spectrum of reactions in that one interaction. I've also had an experience where I was in Texas and speaking to a family there. And the father of the family was the only one who wasn't really into this whole flat earth thing. So I just casually mentioned it to him and said, "Oh, I hear you're not interested in the flat earth." And he said, "Yeah, no, not really. I'm not convinced by it." So we had a very calm, kind of rational little debate to it, and got to say about the curvature. And when you look at a boat going over the horizon, you can zoom in on it and get it back. And he said, oh no, that's not true. I said, well, go and Google, go on YouTube and find one of the videos. And he just so happened to find the wrong video. It was a debunking video from, I think, somebody called Red's Rhetoric or something.
Yeah.
And so he looked at it and said, there, see, it's not true. I said, no, that's the wrong video. And, it looks like the boat's going down because of this like effect, where it's the reflection of the boat. And all of a sudden he went, there's no reflection, there's no, and he was crying, real tears down his face. I said, look, let's agree to disagree. He went out of the room, and 5 minutes later, he came back in, and he went to his son, the reflection, there's no reflection! And he threw me out of his house, and he wanted to fight me. He's like prowling up and down the road in front of me, sneering at me. So that was one of the more extreme reactions I've got. I also did a talk at a festival, and somebody stood up in the middle of the talk and said, "You're lying! You should tell the truth to these people!" And he kept heckling me through the entire talk. So I ended up sitting down and said, you give the talk since you know everything about it. So he actually started talking, and I heckled him. So, and then some of the people at the festival sort of ushered him out. But then he followed me for the next 3 days, saying, "You should get everybody back together and tell them that you're lying," and all that. So it does evoke some very strong emotions.
I have a question.
Yes, Tony, go ahead.
How can we see the moon phases in the daytime? Like how you can see like the moon in half in the daytime?
That's an interesting one, because I can't see how that you can, especially when you see a full moon during the daytime. Yeah, I've seen it where at midday, right, 12 o'clock noon, you can go out and see a full moon, in the daytime. The problem is that when the moon is in the daytime sky, it's the other side of the moon that's being illuminated. So how can the front side be illuminated? There's no way you can be at midday that you can see that side of the moon being fully illuminated.
Unless it's translucent.
So the best you should be able to see is at least half the moon, but more likely just a sliver of it.
Down here,
no, I don't understand.
Down here we get the moon chasing the sun, trying to get to Africa.
Yeah, the rabbit in the hare.
All right.
Yeah, it keeps trying to follow the sun every time.
27 and a half hours.
I should imagine you guys get some other strange effects. Living down, say down there, living across there.
But we just had a Clinton down here.
A what?
A Clinton.
Hillary Clinton.
Oh no!
Yeah, she's down here,
Yes.
And nobody tried to shoot her.
No, we gifted her some money. We gave her some money for coming here.
They need to go away.
Yeah. Child slavery project.
What's another new foundation?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a thought about the moon being like a disc, or they say it might be a sphere. And in correlation with Tony's question, during the day, the moon still has its phases. So what I tell people, if it was a solid sphere of terra firma, then you would see the whole face of it during the day, all the time.
Sure.
You don't. You only see parts of it sometimes, half of it. So that's why, I'm thinking it might be a bowl-shaped search type light or something.
Kind of like a divot.
Yeah,
like
it turns around and you can see that.
Otherwise, if it was a disc light, even if it was a disc, you would still get the phases, though, wouldn't you? If it's turning, you just see the side of it, the sliver.
It's like the flat Earth is round, but it could look like a plate.
Yeah.
From deep space.
See, my thoughts are it's actually more of a divot. Because the craters are all on our side. We didn't send something up to hit it, to cause the craters. But if it was like thinking of it being a golf ball that's hit the outside of the firmament, and depending on where the other light is, reflecting in, and you'll get those different phases appear no matter whether it's daytime or nighttime. So it's like an inverted dent on a shell. So and depending on where the sun is and its orbit, you get your different effects. The turning is just your perspective as it goes over, just like an airplane going over. You see the wings turn as it passes your centre point. Yeah.
I've got a bit of a dilemma in my head that I haven't been able to figure out. Okay, maybe somebody I can.
South Africa will never beat us again.
That's part of the great deception.
You need to practice rugby more. Yeah.
Okay. So here's my thinking. If you go out during the day and you've got say a big beach ball and you can put it up into the sky, confirm to me that a shadow is black. That's the only colour of a shadow is black. Am I right? Because there's no light in there.
Yeah. It's the blockage of
light. Am I right?
Yeah.
I think so. Okay, so if you've got a shadow, it's black because there's no light getting there.
Yeah.
So my thinking is this: if you hold a ball up in the sky with the sun shining on it, all right? Because they say the moon's a ball. I'm talking about that half is it's black, all right? So at night time, when you look at let's take a half moon. If you look at a half moon, the shadow side is black.
Sure.
Right? But at midday, if you look at a half moon, that shadow side is the same color as the sky.
Yeah.
It's not black.
Sure, you can see the stars through it.
Yeah, so therefore, it can't be the shadow from the sun. Because if it was the shadow from the sun, and it was a solid, that half would be, whether it's night or day, it would be in shadow, wouldn't it? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right. I know what you're saying. Now, the talk I did a UK conference was debunking the debunkers, and part of that was actually debunking some of the things that we say, and that was actually one of them, right? Because I'm not saying that you're wrong, or the moon isn't transparent, as some people say. I'm just saying that when they have an explanation in their model that is plausible, we can't use that as a proof, because they already have an answer for it. Now, the answer in this case is if you had a flashlight, a torch, and it was a very powerful one, and you shone it at night, you would actually see the beam of light, even though you can't see, you can't see a light that's going across you. You have to see it, aimed at you, so that you actually see the light. Sure. But when you use a torch beam, a very powerful torch beam at night, facing away from you, you actually see the beam, because what's happening is that light is being reflected off the air molecules, the air particles.
Fair enough.
So the sun is lighting up the air molecules, right, and causing the blue. This is their model, causing the blue light, right, because the sun is so bright, it's actually lighting up the air molecules, and the air is between us and the moon. So the only light, the only part of the moon that's being seen is the lighted part. That's the only one that's the only thing that will get past the lighting up of the air molecules.
So the reflection of the sun.
So literally, you'll only see the lit part of the moon, not the dark part. That's their model, and and it works as a model. We don't have another model that would show why the moon would have a black darkened part.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yes.
kind of. Yeah.
Do you think, Dave, Mars or the Mars realm could be past the dome that's stuck into the ice beyond Antarctica?
No, I go with the Old Testament's description that it's in the firmament. It's a wandering star, just like the other planets. It just means wanderer, wandering star.
Very good.
Excuse me, Dave. I'm interested in your
you were an atheist for over 40 years, and you investigated how ludicrous this flat Earth concept was. Could you explain a little bit about your journey and the turmoil of your journey from atheism to there's some sort of creator who wants to know me? Thanks.
Brian. Yeah, well, I actually got the King James Bible originally because I found out that King James was black, actually, and so I thought, well, I better find out what. Yes, I know. Unless you start researching, you won't know this, but I found engravings of King James that couldn't be whitewashed, and it's indeed a black guy. You know, all the paintings have been repainted, so you can't tell, but the engravings can't be changed. And there's like at least 3 engravings of man, and it's clearly a black guy. So I thought, well, okay, better find out what why he got this book translated. And it says in the his foreword, that he got the book translated because there were people who were trying to, and he meant the Roman Catholic Church, trying to hide the word of the Most High. So I got the book, but I never actually bothered reading it. You know, I think there was another instance that maybe picked the book up again, but I can't remember what that was now. But the third time was somebody saying, "Oh, the Bible's a flat Earth book." I was like, "Is it really?" So I started looking at it, and looking at the isolated verses that were saying that it's a flat Earth book, and I had to conclude that the Hebrew cosmology is exactly the same as the flat Earth model that we're looking at. So that's when I decided that I'm actually going to read the book, actually read it, sit down and read it from beginning to end. So I read it through once, I read it through a second time, and I got stuck at the transition between the Old Testament and the New Testament, and realised that, and this isn't very popular either, the New Testament was added on. It's not part of the the Book of Remembrance. It was created by Romans to pacify their slaves, basically. So it was just kind of obvious when you read it through, and you read it as a story, and also you plug in some of the information about who the actual characters were. That was my next piece of research. And when I did my first video, which was called "The Biggest Lie of All," I started looking at the Bible and realised that there was an even bigger lie underneath, and that lie was human history and its relationship to the Bible.
Very good. Cool. We've got to fly this guy in for the next Flat Earth conference.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
We've got to fly you here for the next conference.
Feel free. I'll be happy to come along.
We'll chip in donations here.
We'll just put him on a
Especially since it's apparently the safest place to be. There's all the elite buying up properties over there, so in preparation for the big one.
Who'd you go to?
You guys have it lucky down there. You can sit there with your popcorn while the rest of the world burns, apparently.
Amen. And none of you are allowed to come here.
I've heard, Dave, Trump's a flat earther.
No, he's just a flathead.
He's a flathead earther. Donald Trump.
Is he a flat earther?
I don't think he is.
He's a
globalist, buddy.
Traitor.
Well, I think that was kind of like a slur that was put on him, because a lot of us got excited that he was saying that, but turns out he said it.
We just know he likes prostitutes.
He wouldn't have started NASA back up again if he thought that.
I'll just get rid.
I was just going to say that we had the UK conference over here a couple of weeks ago, and it featured a debate with some physicists.
I'll watch that.
And I really had a good time talking to these physicists because essentially we stumped them at least 3 or 4 times. It was actually, well, I guess it would be a kind of historic moment. It was the first time we've actually been sitting opposite them. They turned out to be PhD students. I think there was one that actually had his PhD. You know, we sat, you know, up against these physicists, and we stumped them, you know, at least 3 times.
Nice.
That was a big moment.
Their indoctrination didn't plan them for that one.
Are you able to give us an insight onto which areas you stumped in?
Yes.
Well, again, one of them was a gyroscope.
Okay.
You know, for the, you know, explains how, you know, we should see if a plane has a gyroscope in its artificial horizon, as the plane rounds the curvature of the Earth, you know, the gyroscope stays upright, so the artificial horizon should roll backwards. They went through, you know, the familiar, oh, yeah, it's tied to the Earth, or it rights itself. But in the end, they had to fall back on, well, gyroscopes aren't my area. The other one was the question about how the Earth hangs on to its atmosphere. If you know, you've got a pressurized system in a vacuum, how does it hang on to its atmosphere? Absolutely. So they spent a good 15-20 minutes arguing that yeah, there's this thing called thermal pressure and gravity, and it holds on and doesn't, and the air literally has less density as you go up, and blah blah blah, and you know it doesn't, you know, the air doesn't leak out anywhere. But then somebody handed me a website which was physics.org, and you know, the headline was 90 tons of atmosphere leaks away into space every day. Every day, yes. So when I told them that, all of a sudden, oh yes, atmosphere does leak all the time. We create new atmosphere all the time. You know? So again, it was one of those you know, quiet admissions of guilt, but they framed it that no, we've got another explanation for it. But yeah, we basically silenced them, got them into that position where they contradicted themselves, you know, at least 3 or 4 times.
Awesome.
It's like the pilots have to adjust altitude for the round Earth, yet they don't. And 2 pilots were lying about it, saying they got to keep constantly adjusting the altitude with their attitude because of the round Earth, which never happens. You always fly straight and level all the time.
Exactly. And they want you to believe, and this is one of the things that they said as well, that the plane is kind of pushing against the Earth as such, so it maintains a constant altitude above the ball. But no, planes push against the air, using their control surfaces. And if your control surface are trimmed straight and level, they've got no relation. It's got no relation to the surface of the Earth. If you trim the plane to be like 5 degrees above level, it will just keep climbing. It's got no relationship to the Earth. You know, if they trim it to be straight and level, it will go straight. So no, they've got no arguments.
Very good.
I've got a question, Dave. Now, we live on a flat Earth with a dome. Now, what we see in models and that is the sun and the moon going around the flat Earth. But could that sun and moon be inside the dome? You know what I mean? Could it be sitting inside the dome and then going around us?
Yes.
I think that's what's keeping it in.
That's the model that I subscribe to. There's a video of a rocket called the Go Faster rocket.
Sure.
I don't know if you guys have caught this.
Yeah.
It's a rocket that goes up, it's spinning wildly, and then it hits something.
73 miles up.
It hits something about 70 miles up.
73.
And I believe that it's not just one, solid firmament. I think you've got sort of levels.
Sure.
And there's level that we literally can't get past, and that's around about 70 miles up. But above that, there is the place where the sun and moon go round, and then there's the actual firmament.
Like layers of an onion.
More than one, because that rocket didn't hit something solid. Didn't hit something a solid material.
Like silicon.
It's just a barrier to stop us from going any further up and interacting with the sun and moon.
Did you see when I first watched that video, they brought out a debunking video straight away, and they said that when it got to a certain height, it spat out these two balls on these chains.
The yo-yos.
It stops the rotation. I was like, so they said every rocket's got these spinning balls that stops the rotation.
Oh, that's right. And they land backwards, eh? Why?
I know, it's rubbish. But that video also, there was two other things in that video that was significant. You actually saw the moon
and the sun
in that video, as well as the sun. And when there was a guy called Refi who did a bit of detective work and found that according to timeanddate.com, the moon should have been on the other side of the Earth. So in a way, you should have been able to see it. The other thing about that is also the sun appeared quite large in the sky. And the moon was like a little dot.
Farther away.
So if the sun and moon are positioned in such a way that they look exactly the same size, how can it be that the moon is a dot? Can ever be seen as a dot with the sun being a lot larger? It's telling you that they're both close, and in this case, the moon was further away than the sun was.
They launched it about midday, didn't they?
That video was very interesting.
Yeah, so they launched it towards the sun. Yeah.
It's like the rubbish they talk about with the ISS. People have questioned, well, how does it, when it sinks down, how do they get it back up into its proper position?
That's thermal
dynamics. They say, it's got a big flywheel on it that counter-rotates and
artificial gravity.
It's just ridiculous. That would not work in a vacuum. It just can't work.
And the bubbles coming up from the astronauts here, are they in a water tank, or are they in space, or is space full of water? Underneath. Photoshopped.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Okay. Just north of Russia, there's an island. Go north of there, and you'll see it. There are big cracks in the CGI.
All right. Okay. No, I've not seen that.
Yeah, have a look. Yeah.
The whole thing's CGI anyway.
Whited out patches.
Yeah.
It's like they're hiding.
Well, that's where the bases are, isn't it?
Apparently.
How long is the
211.
ISS supposed to have been up there?
They used one of the parts of the old space lab, didn't they? And
Skylab.
Skylab, sorry.
How long the ISS has been up in the supposed space thing?
No orbit.
The ISS is supposed to have been put up in 1999. The very odd thing, though, is that nobody's ever seen it being put together. The only place you see it being put together is on the beginning of Star Trek Enterprise. But if this is one of the crowning achievements of mankind, some people would have taken a video camera or something. And said, "Oh look, we're putting this here." No, there's no footage anywhere of this thing, this massive space station.
And what are we in orbit?
And where are the satellites and the stars?
That's one of the things that
what about repairs?
Eddie Bravo.
Everything's on the outside.
Just get a GoPro camera on the astronaut. They got there 4 times a year. Chuck it on his helmet. No cuts, no edits. Go up in your spaceship. Dock with something that's
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hasn't broken down in 20 years.
Exactly. But they don't do that. Bring the camera around and show us everything.
Cassini's got a good shot.
It's always the fourth wall. It's always that fourth wall. You're just watching a set, and I'm absolutely convinced that somewhere in the world they have a massive pool, a huge engineering job with this massive pool with a big projection screen either above it or below it that's showing you this picture that's supposed to be Earth. I reckon the one thing you can look at when you look at this blue and white thing that's supposedly going underneath the space station, just choose a couple of features that appear on the horizon and watch them move at the same speed as everything else in that picture.
Doesn't happen
It shows you that you're not looking at something thousands of miles long, you're looking at some hundreds of yards across.
That's right.
Hey Dave, have you ever had an interview with that Neil deGrasse?
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I would love across the table from that guy. Just like the PhD students. Just watch the guy twist and turn. I just love that. Just give me the opportunity.
Bring it on.
Take a few extra microphones and show them how mass and density works.
I think one of the filming areas you're talking about is the Russian space camp. You know, in Britain they had that program, Space Camp, and they tricked those people into believing that
Space Camp.
Did you see that? Yeah. Then they had these guys fooled, you know. Admittedly, some of them were a bit dubious, but it just shows you what can be done with technology tricking people.
Fly helicopter.
And those people, might be a little bit more naive than others, hence why they were chosen. But it just gives you an idea of what can be achieved. And if they've got all that very easily set up to do that program, how do we know what they haven't got? Set up with the astronauts complying.
I heard they go on, they pretend to go on the rocket, they go back
And they
into
go
the lift.
down the chute.
Number 4 or whatever.
For sure.
The escape chute.
UAP channel does a really good one about the, he calls them rockoons. Rockets crossed with balloons.
Yes.
And if you get the chance, have a look. He points out the space shuttle and says, does that not just look like a bouncy castle that's been inflated with helium or hydrogen? And they've seen that up.
What's interesting is that NASA is the biggest consumer of helium on the planet.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so,
it's expensive
what
stuff.
they're using for that helium.
And they're running out.
The other thing is that we know that nobody went up on the space shuttle because that time when the
Blew up.
shuttle challenged,
6 out of 7 still.
6 and 7 astronauts are still around. So still here today. So nobody goes up on that thing.
Maybe you might be able to answer this. What are stars?
Stars, according to the Book of Remembrance, they're angels. They're living celestial beings. And when you zoom in on them with a P900, it's easy to see that being the case because each one of them is unique. Each one of them looks like something different. One looks like wheels within wheels. One looks like watery fire. One looks like electrical sparks. They're very unique things.
And they change in shape too.
And you to believe that they are celestial beings.
If you shine a torch on a swimming pool, the light that you'll see shining through the water on the bottom is very reminiscent of what you'll see with a lot of stars.
Sonoluminescence.
Water above the firmament.
Exactly.
It's the water above the firmament. And all the stars do the same track.
It's reminiscent, but as I said, some of them look very, very
That's
different.
right,
Some
I
of
have
them
seen
look
different ones.
perfect circles with with sort of detail like crosses and
I've seen
whatever. It's not just like a wavy pattern water.
Yep, they're not all the same for sure. I've seen ones that have warped and morphing in and out of different patterns, and some of them I was like pushing the pause button, and I swear to you, some of them look like demon faces, some of them look like angry little beings, and some of them look like beautiful faces. But yeah, like Dave says, some of them were looking like electrical charges, fire and that, so yeah, they've probably all got their own.
And they seem
different
to be on a
elements.
track, because on time lapse, you watch them, they all do that spiral except for the fixed stars. Northern Pole, the Little Dipper, Big Dipper, whatever, the other big ones that are fixed.
Yeah.
I think they're beyond the dome.
Right. Okay. And isn't it funny that all the scientists who have announced that, well, from our observations, it seems like everything is revolving around us. They haven't said literally that, oh, we're a flat stationary plane.
Geocentric,
But it seems everything is revolving around us. We seem to be in the same. All of them lose their jobs.
Yeah, from all the
and their ground
satellites.
and everything.
With regards to stars beyond the dome, I think I have a slightly different viewpoint, because on the fourth day of creation, God put the sun, moon, and stars in the firmament.
So what causes the fixed ones?
It clearly says in the firmament.
Yeah. Go for it.
I was going to say that, I don't think there's anything beyond the dome. I think what's happening here is we're in a bubble of 3D space and time.
Sure.
A bubble of 3D space and time has been created for us, and outside of this, well, there is no outside, because that would imply 3D space and time. Yeah, there is. There is another realm, another dimension that's outside of this. Yeah, and the moment we arrived here as a spirit inhabiting a body is the same moment that we leave. From the perspective of outside of here, because as I said, 3D space and time only exists here.
True. Nice.
Brilliant.
Cool. Can you tell me this, with the flat earth model, how can you get 6 months of sunshine, daylight in the North Pole, and then 6 months of darkness? Because people that go to the South Pole, and they go down there from Scott Base from New Zealand, and there can be 6 months there of daylight and 6 months of darkness.
112 days of darkness.
I'll show you.
Sure. Well, that's kind of explained by the sun actually moving between the tropics. So it doesn't just circle around the equator. It kind of moves into the Tropic of Capricorn. I can't remember which one. Which one? It goes in, so it's around that area. So when it's around the northern side, it's going to be dark for most of the time in the south. And then when it goes out and circles out in the other tropic, then the reverse happens.
But I got a gentleman here told me that the South Pole is ice right around the Earth. The guy over here said that to me.
Correct. Cook sailed about 60,000 miles around and could not find an end to...
yeah, but that doesn't make sense to me, because you go down the South Pole and you get 6 months of daylight and 6 of night. How can you have that
if you
right
watch
around the Earth?
Because
the North Pole, that goes past the North.
But when it comes to the North Pole, it's not at the south, so you get your 112 days of darkness in Antarctica.
Yeah,
and
because
then, as it comes back out, then we get the summer.
Yeah, so while this is rotating closer to the centre, you see nothing like that, but then when it comes out to daylight out there, then it goes like that, and then when it comes back in towards the centre, floating, there's the equator, and it's floating between the two tropics.
Yeah, but if you're going around like this,
think of the
only got daylight and so much.
Sorry. Is there anything you'd like to mention, Dave? Anything you'd like to have a talk about? Anything that interests you?
I did kind of mention the debate. That was all I really wanted to mention.
It was a brilliant debate.
I think we can have a few more of these. Hopefully that some physicists who watch the debate might want to try their luck against us. And I look forward to that.
Awesome. Did you want to mention the UK convention that happened? Tell us a bit about that, if you could.
Right. Well, for me, that debate was the highlight of the convention. There were a few speakers that were quite interesting. I don't know if you know Flat Earth British.
Yep. Sure.
It's quite entertaining.
Martin.
Martin.
We thought you were British.
And Nathan, and was Nathan there, and Antonio?
Yeah, Nathan Oakley was there. He was there on the first night. He was there with a guy called Anthony Riley, and they were talking about like floaty land, basically. They were talking about the kind of reflection that you see when you look over long distances.
Right.
So it was very interesting convention. It was populated with a lot of press. A surprising amount of press were actually there. A few of them were undercover as well.
Did that work out all right for you?
Were they the
Sorry, second?
Did it work out all right for you with the press?
For the most part, obviously a lot of them came to the predictable conclusions that we're crazy and there's something lacking in our lives for us to be looking for this. But generally they were quite sympathetic. Unfortunately, the day after the numbers went off onto TV, national TV, and got to say they did quite a poor job of answering the questions. In fact, I'm going to have to say that one of them was a bit of a setup because one of the guys who was a speaker actually said something that no flat earther would ever say. He said that all astronauts were military guys. And none of us would say that. We might say that they're all Freemasons, but none of us would say that all astronauts are military. And it just so happened that the host, Philip Schofield, he looked down at a piece of paper he had, and he had the exact facts and figures to rebut this very statement. Right? So he just, in a live interview where the conversation could have gone anywhere, he just happened to have the right information to rebut something that no flat earther would ever say.
Sounds like a Hillary.
I found that rather suspicious.
That's why we sent him back to the UK.
Yeah, we didn't want to keep Philip.
You can keep Philip.
Okay, anyone else?
Anybody else?
I just wanted to say that his debate was amazing, and it was also very, very hilarious. We all had a very good laugh by watching.
Did you hear? You didn't hear that?
I didn't hear that.
She just said she wanted to let you know that she thought your debate was extremely entertaining, very hilarious, and kept us all in stitches. So thank you.
Oh, and also the young guy, the young physicist who was closest to you in that debate. Did you swing him to flat earthness because he looked like he was on the?
He was turning for.
I don't know. I don't think so. It's interesting. I did an interview for somebody from Cardiff University, and so obviously they did a interview with me and another flat earther, but they used that same guy as the Science O2 guy. I haven't posted it on my YouTube channel, but I probably will do eventually. And you'll see it's the same guy. He's even wearing the same clothes, and he's rebutting everything that I was saying. So it's really interesting that in this interview, he's rebutting everything I'm saying. He's the kind of final word of authority. But in the debate, I shut him up 3 times.
It's good to see how you made him say that Newton's theories were shit. Wrong.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing.
He used that as an argument.
I came up with.
I could go an argument
the Nana theory, and spent 10 years coming up with some maths that will make a couple of predictions here and there, but that doesn't say that my theory is right or anything. It just tells you that the maths works out.
Oh yeah. You'll have to take him out for a drink and swing him, Dave.
Well, funnily enough, I did ask the producer of the video, of the documentary that you know, I asked him if he could pass my details on to him so I could have a chat with him.
Awesome.
So maybe something else will come out of it, I don't know.
Hey, you might be able to get on the piss with him. Pun intended.
No, Dave doesn't destroy his body.
For those who don't know, Dave's into urine therapy, so.
Yeah, woo, woo, woo. Yeah.
Midstream.
No, it's working wonders, isn't it, Dave?
It worked for my eye infection.
Yep.
Well, yes. You know, for one thing, I got my mother onto it. She's 75, and you know, she was in a wheelchair for 10 years. She's had a crumbling back for 50 years, and you know, she's been in pain for 50 years. She was on urine therapy for a year and a half, and now she's out of a wheelchair. She's off all her medication. She had a whole tabletop full of drugs she had to take every day. She's off everything. She's walking around like my sister, and she looks like she's in her 40s. And actually, if I can do this, I'm going to share my screen.
Awesome.
Yes.
You might have to bear with me a second.
No problem.
It's the mother of Ayurveda, eh?
Sorry?
The mother of Ayurvedic medicine in India.
Exactly.
Urine therapy.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. For skin,
Eddie Paddy always drink his own urine too.
Yeah.
In his prime.
Especially when you're
Tell me if you can see my screen, by the way.
See your screen.
Okay.
Is that porn?
One moment.
Hide your porn folder.
So we can see it on the market shelves in the future. You're on a feature.
Look at that.
Wow.
Can you see this?
Yes, Dave, that's amazing, babe.
Right, so this was my mum. This was my mum before she started,
Wow.
and she's in a wheelchair. This is her a year and a half afterwards.
Wow.
That's
Okay.
amazing.
And I'll show you a picture of her now. This is her now.
Right, this is you know.
Awesome, brother.
And this was me. Yeah, I was nearly 20 stone, and I was suffering from a whole load of things, and you know, now I'm not suffering from anything. I'm in the best shape of my entire life, and I've just turned 55.
Amen. Awesome, brother. Good on you, bro.
It works.
All right.
Certainly does.
Proof's in the pudding.
I don't know if everyone else is interested, but I'd really like you to mention a bit about common law, maybe even the issue with the courts you had when you had the magistrate arrested or under citizen's arrest. If you'd like to let us know about that.
Hey, us guys have to go because our
lights
turned up.
Okay, hang on a sec, Dave. Sorry, hang on. Okay, guys, we've got some people leaving.
She's
Sorry,
going
Dave.
that way, I'm going this way.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
I'm just taking this one back to the motel. It's 10 minutes away.
Okay, thanks, Adrian. We'll see you when you get back. Okay, yeah, fire away, Dave.
All right, so the particular incident you were talking about was concerning a council tax case. You know, we get taxed on our houses over here, and this council tax case was being handled by or was against a guy called Dories. And in the middle of this case, Roger basically asked the judge to produce his oath, and the judge refused. So he asked him 3 times, and at the end of the 3rd time, you know, Roger actually called to arrest that man because he wasn't a judge. Because if he can't produce his oath, he's not a judge. Yeah, so we kind of planned this the night before. So we had one guy who would kind of make a lunge for the judge, and literally the police that were in the courtroom would go for him. And that worked out very nicely. We had this other guy who calmly walked around the side, went up to the judge, put his hand on the judge's shoulder and said, "You're under arrest, you don't need to say anything," and blah, 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 and actually arrested the judge.
And it is on YouTube.
As pandemonium broke out, everybody sort of was cheering stuff, and couple of the guys opened up the courtroom so that you know, some of the 600 people that had gathered could come into the courtroom. And essentially, the judge was actually arrested. He was physically arrested, you know, by a citizen's arrest, which carries the same weight as a policeman arresting, making an arrest. And the judge was actually rescued. That's actually a legal term. Rescued by the police. But he was technically still at large. And it turns out that he never sat another case again.
Yes.
Whether he lost the confidence of the people, or he was actually on the run, we don't know. He never actually sat another case.
Awesome.
But what was also interesting was that a month or so later, I had a court case myself, and it was just a speeding ticket. I got rid of a couple of other speeding tickets with paperwork, but I wanted to see how I'd do against the judge. So I only had about 20 people come along to this courtroom, but they had 3 van loads of police outside. They had loads of police in the courtroom waiting for us. They brought in a district judge just for a speeding ticket. And they refused to let more than 10 other people in the room. Because if I guess the reasoning was if they allowed 12 people in the room, then they could have made a jury. So they refused to let any more than 10 other people in the room. So I had a court case with this judge who wanted to play, and obviously he doesn't get a lot of opportunities to actually play. But yeah, we had what turned out to be a kind of chess match, and at one point I actually got him. I cornered him. But he was such a good player that I didn't realise that I got him, and he just ran away with it and beat me. So he fined me £895 for a speeding ticket.
That's ridiculous.
But I had the last laugh. I paid him with a promissory note. And so literally I just printed off this note. I promised to pay the bearer, and I got a couple of witnesses to sign it, and yeah, I paid it off with that. So end of story.
Awesome, Dave. Brilliant. That's something I believe we all need to pay attention to. Myself, you know, is that we hold the right, not the government. You know, truth is the authority, not authority as the truth. You know.
Right. The only problem with that is that you're dealing with a group of criminals.
Exactly.
Yeah. Your government and all these entities are criminals. The police, the courts, they're all criminals, and they're all working against you.
For sure.
The greater problem is the muggles out there who have no idea of the truth, and they believe the story that these authority figures give them. So if you're standing up for your rights, they feel that they can roll over you, because anybody looking from the outside will side with the police and believe that you're just making stuff up. So it's, you know, you're likely to get rolled over. But, you know, I knew that going into it, and you know, I did it to make a stand.
Good on you.
I think more people need to put aside the fear and make a stand.
I did that.
Hey Dave, I was just going to mention, not sure if everyone knows that you're actually broadcasting out of your van still, or?
Yes, I live off grid. I'm in a motorhome on a farm, sort of in a quiet corner, in the woods, and on sort of national park, basically.
Free Wi-Fi.
Freedom camper. I'm hooking into a free Wi-Fi signal about half a mile away.
Thanks,
Well done, Dave.
Really awesome, mate.
Well, Dave, I think it's time to call it a night for you. We really appreciate your time. Are you going to be watching the royal wedding tomorrow, or will you be asleep?
You know, I will definitely, absolutely be asleep. Reptiles, you know, reptiles procreating.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
God bless you.
You guys take care.
Right, Thank you.
Catch you up later.
Over and out, flat and level.
Thank you.